Hello, welcome to React Holiday Season 2, Day 4 of the 2018 holiday. No, Day 5. Oh my gosh, Day 5. We're already on Day 5. I can't believe it. Only 20 days left. Today, I'm not going to talk about a lot of new stuff. I'm not going to introduce a new feature. I just want to talk about resources. Now, first of all, if you're following along, yesterday we talked about kind of the different versions of React Cache. I've asked around, and it does seem like the one that is on master is the right one. So no more setting up a cache, no more reading from the cache. That's all handled under the hood for us. So we really just have this create resource, and we call, where is it? Read on it. Perfect. That was an easier way to do it. I'm very happy about that because I don't know the trade-offs, but I'm happy that it's simpler for us. So first thing, I have forked this project from yesterday's, and I'm calling this What's a Resource For? Now, we know that we can create a resource. We're doing that here. We're using create resource. We're kind of assigning it to this Pokemon collection resource. And then we are giving it a function to call, which is to fetch this data from this endpoint, turn it into JSON, and then that's it. Basically cache it for us. And if we have the data, then present the data. If we don't, then communicate with Suspense. Now, that's effectively all that this resource does. It is a wrapper around a promise that communicates with our Suspense component. So we have our fetch call. So that's going to go to the server that has this Pokemon data. It's going to collect everything. But the thing is, that doesn't happen immediately. It's asynchronous. So we don't know when that's going to resolve. So we wrap that promise inside of a resource. Now, the resource is what knows how to communicate that information in a way that Suspense can then take control. So that is why we have, so in this read component, where we're reading data, we have that in a component, right? And that's why we need to have that component boundary. So when this kind of does its thing that says like, oh, I don't have data yet, like figure something else out to do, we can then wrap that in this Suspense component and render a fallback. Now, if you've used error boundaries, it's a lot like error boundaries. There has to be a component boundary here in order for that error to propagate appropriately and to be able to be caught by this Suspense component. Or not error, in order for that promise, like the promise reject, like that waiting state, in order that to be conveyed to the Suspense component. So I want to show you what that looks like. Okay, so this is the code for unstable create root. If we go to the top, we can see that that's in React packages, React cache source, React cache.js. Now, so we go back down. Where was it? Here to unstable create root, and there's all this stuff happening. But this is where the magic happens. So there's a switch. We say that if the result is pending, then we're going to throw result value. Now, I don't know all of the internals, but I do know that this whole Suspense thing is kind of based on this idea of throwing a promise and then kind of coming back to it at a later time. So again, I don't know the details, so you'll have to ask someone smarter than me. But in the case that we are pending results, like that promise hasn't resolved yet, we want to throw up to Suspense. And then that's when Suspense would take over. Our Suspense boundary right here would take over and says, oh, we can't render this yet. So we'll render the fallback until we can. It's going to keep retrying that until we have, until it's resolved. Or retrying might be a bad way to say it, but that's how I think about it. So when we have the value, it's just going to return the value, and then it doesn't shoot up to Suspense anymore, right? And so then we go back to our code. Now it just renders that component, right? It doesn't have to hoist the pending state back up to Suspense. So that's great. And then if it's rejected, it throws an error, which we haven't done yet, but we would catch with an error boundary. We'll probably do that next. I'm not going to do it today. So that is the code that handles that process right now. So that's it. One thing that this isn't real, but like when a mental model that I like to have for this is to kind of think of Suspense as a retry, and in catch we would render our fallback. So we'd wrap this whole thing in retry, and then have this be like a try thing that we would or try resource read. So again, this is all just pseudocode. It's not a perfect analogy, but I think at a very low level or very high level, at a very high level, it is a decent way to think about this. That this thing is going to just kind of retry this thing until it works, and then if it doesn't work, it's gonna, for the times that it doesn't work, it's going to render this fallback, and it's going to try to read that resource. And if it doesn't, render the fallback. If not, come back and try it again later. So that is it for today. Now, lest you think that resources are just about data, they are not. You can use a resource to wrap any promise. Now, I'm going to go back up to the top here. If you go into React, there is a fixtures directory. And there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. These are kind of the real world tests that the React team uses to kind of build out examples using these new features. So we go to fixtures, unstable async, suspense, source, component, user page is where this one's found. And this one is really cool. You can see that, lost my scroll position. You can see that here we're creating an image component, right? And for the source, we're using image resource.read source, and we're passing that source along. Curious. And this image resource is using, again, create resource, or unstable create resource, taking that source as an argument, and then creating a promise. And it's going to basically create a new image and then onload, kind of call resolve with that source. And we're going to actually, I don't want to give too much away. So we're going to do the same exact thing in our example. And you'll see the difference that it makes when we actually wrap this image in a create resource. It's pretty cool. And it gives you so much like fine-grained control over kind of rendering and what renders and what you want to resolve first before you render. Anyway, it's really neat. I just want to direct you to this to show you that a resource can wrap any promise, which is really neat. Finally, I'd love for you to get a little bit more experience with resources. So your assignment this week, if you choose to do it, is to not just render a list, but use that same pattern using the resource and a component and suspense and a fallback to render a Pokemon. You can grab any of the data that you want out of this. There's a ton of it there to work with, and just start creating a Pokemon detail component. So if you don't like Bulbasaur, you can just kind of navigate through here and get anyone you like. That's it for today. Thanks for hanging in there. Tomorrow we'll probably talk about error boundaries, just so you can see what happens if the promise never resolves, or it gets rejected. Anyway, carry on. You're doing great work. See ya soon.